And that's the way I want to go at the end. Like, I don't want to have any regrets. It'll be too late then. I needed this, going back to like just the spirituality, I needed to scratch this itch. I needed to know if I could do this. Like, I never wanted to know what if. This was just something that I had to know. I would rather die as a failure than not knowing if I was a failure or not.
All right, and huge welcome to the Ultra Running Guys podcast. You got Jeremy Reynolds and Jeff Winchester of the Ultra Running Guys. Just want to say thank you. If you're tuning in, please go ahead and follow if you're not already, because we've got a lot of great guests lined up. And speaking of great guests, tonight we are super excited. If you are a runner and you're on social media, you've probably come across FMS Running, which stands for First Mile Sucks, which is awesome, by the way. And we've got the guy behind it, Ron Maver. And obviously cool company, but the guy has run some really neat ultras.
Definitely.
And mainly just has a transformational story that we want to kind of dive into. So Ron, with that, man, welcome to the show.
Thank you, guys. And thank you. I appreciate you having me.
And so if you're hearing the accent, it's going to throw you off because he's actually living in Hilton Head. Yeah, Hilton Head, South Carolina, but you may have picked up that's not where he's originally from. So, Ron, we really want to dive into your story. So why don't you give us, I guess, kind of a quick introduction, give us some background on kind of where that accent came from, and then we'll really dive in because it's pretty fascinating.
Yeah, so as you said, I currently live in Hilton Head Island, South Carolina. I'm the founder of First Mile Sucks Running. I'm originally from New Jersey, right outside Manhattan. I worked before this lifetime. I worked in the Metropolitan Opera House for 20 years, and I worked with guys from Brooklyn, the Bronx, Long Island, Queens, all that. And we spent about 15 hours a day together over the course of 8 months. And so now I'm kind of molding all those accents into one thick as hell Jersey accent. And all I have to do is open up my mouth down here, and you'll see 10 heads turn around. Well, there's no hiding where you come from.
It's funny, man, because, the first thing I saw was Hilton Head. That's one of our favorite places. So I'm seeing this guy, this runner from Hilton Head. And then I went and listened to the first podcast, that you were on, just to kind of get some background.
So let's be honest. You said, Jeff, you need to listen to how he sounds.
I did. I was like, this is not what I expected, from Hilton Head. But
because I'm from South Carolina myself originally. So yeah, I'm from right outside of Charleston. And so when he said, he's from Hilton Head, and we go listen to him, man, it is pretty thick, brother. And so
and
cool.
This is probably a little subdued compared to what it was 2 years ago.
I'm sure. Well, so there's a really interesting story behind the journey from New Jersey, New York to Hilton Head. You mentioned working at the Metropolitan Opera. Take us back to there. I think where we really want to get into is who was the Ron Maver that was there that essentially got to a point where you decided some changes need to be made. And we want to kind of walk through that journey to the guy we're talking to now. So paint that picture for us. Yeah.
So, he was a completely different guy. I was one person when I started there, and probably slowly lost who I was over the course of, I would say I was there 20 years. Over the course of 17 years, I probably slowly lost who I was inside as a person and as a human being, to nobody's fault but my own. I don't want to make it seem like that, but it's a tough business. It's a lot of hours. I was working 15 hours a day, like I said, 8 a.m. to midnight, so 16 hours a day. I was leaving my house at 6:30. I was getting home at 1 a.m, waking up, doing it all over again. And I had kids, and I never saw my kids. And slowly but surely, I let, the frustration and the anger of life and not seeing my kids and not thinking that I had reached my potential, and not thinking I was fulfilling anything, and just basically spending 80% of my life in this dark theater that I was missing so much everyday stuff that little by little that slowly started eating away at me, to the point that nobody I think, around me really recognized me anymore, particularly like my wife, my kids. I became like a bitter, angry guy, and I did my best to hide it. But what I ended up really doing was, if I'm being perfectly honest, I ended up self-medicating. I ended up drinking too much. Not, you know, I was probably like on the borderline of having issues. It's weird. I'll go through it as we go along, but I just became this person I didn't even recognize. But at the time, I didn't realize it. I just blamed everybody else. You know, it was even like my wife, my kids. I resented everyone. I resented the world, and that's not easy to say. And but I feel like if I don't say it, that I'm not telling the truth. And the whole thing was based on the truth, and going through this, and even for me to have this conversation with you and be so open about, you know, I was at the whole time I was just suffering from anxiety and depression, and I was just getting crippled worse and worse. You know, I'd wake up, I'd have like an anxiety attack. I'd get in the shower, I'd calm down. I would go sit on 495, which is the highway that leads into the Lincoln Tunnel. I'd have another anxiety attack. My heart would be pumping. You know, I was just worn out, and I was just beaten down, and just in a really, really dark place, to the point where I didn't think I was ever going to make it out. I just thought that was my life. I was either going to end up dead from a heart attack, dead just by myself in an apartment, drinking myself to death, divorced. Like I wasn't getting along with anybody, and I didn't care. About 4 years ago, I blew out my shoulder at work, and I was out of work for about 8 months. And that was the first time I really had a chance to take a breath since I was 22. I started at the Met right after college. So when I was 22, I'm now 40. And I had just gone into this like overweight guy that, you know, was just miserable and didn't really do much. And I should say, I also yo-yoed a little bit. Like I tried to do things. I ran New York City Marathon in 2007 because my son was born. I ran it again in 2009, but I'd get in like good enough shape to run it, but I wasn't fully committed. As soon as it ended, you know, you get that post-race drop, and it would go for a year. And then in 2009, it went for the better part of almost probably 7 years. And I just wasn't active, and I kept fooling myself thinking I was active. So going back to that, so when I had the time off, at first it was a tough adjustment that nobody was used to me being home. So when I came, you know, when I was home for that time, I blew it out in September. So when I came home, I started trying to implement my way of doing things. I mean, to be perfectly honest, I was just an asshole. And I recognize that now. And, you know, I had a serious conversation with my wife. I remember it was in the kitchen, and she was like, you have to start straightening this out. You know, this is not working. I feel like you hate me. And in a way, she was right. What I was doing was taking parts of other people that and in my mind, trying to mold my wife and my kids into what I think they should be, and not just let them who they should be. So she talked to me about going to therapy, and I was resistant at first, but over that course of those 8 months when I was home, I kind of came around a little bit, and I went to a therapist, and the first guy I didn't like, he just put me right away on, he walked in and was like, you should go on Zoloft, you should go on lithium. And that was not the route I wanted to take. I knew, you know, I'm a guy that I don't even like taking aspirin. And to me, it was kind of putting a Band-Aid on a gunshot wound. Like I needed to go in and find out why I was like this and what was going on. So somebody else, a friend of mine, recommended another therapist. And I went in and I talked to this guy, and we just clicked immediately. And, you know, I explained to him where I was at and how dark of a place it really was. And he was the first person that really ever heard me say that. So, you know, through a lot of hard work with him and some really tough conversations with my wife and with myself, I went home and told my wife like everything that I had been hiding and how I was really just this miserable bastard that like hated the world, and I couldn't figure out why. So, you know, we talked everything out, and I had become fully committed at that point to ending this. I was, as the saying goes, I was just sick and tired of being sick and tired.
So real quick, when you say ending this, you talking about just the way you were feeling, the relationships, the career, which part?
What's the this?
Yeah, what's the this?
I think everything. Like I was tired of living the way I was living in terms of doing a job I didn't like for that many hours, not seeing my kids.
Right.
You know, if I did have a free night, like, you know, waking up hungover, waking up feeling shitty, eating bad, just I didn't even know who I was anymore. And I didn't know where to start or where to even get out of it. And this therapist that I found showed me the way. What I had to basically do was, if I was a house, I had to gut that house down to the bare bones and meet everything head on, every feeling I had, every doubt I had, every anxiety, all the depression, and I had to rebuild myself into what I wanted to be.
And so was that, I'm just curious, because this is the way I always think, right? If there's somebody that's listening or watching and going, man, that is exactly how I feel. Was that process something that you mainly did through therapy, that was guided by therapy? Or is that something where you just said, man, like, this is the moment where I start just doing things different, and it's going to suck for a while? But how did you step through that?
I couldn't have done it without therapy. I had the drive and the will to do it, but I needed the tools. I didn't have them. And the reason I'm so open about this now is that I don't ever want to be, whether it's my kids who carry the gene or somebody out there, I don't want anyone to ever have to wait 40 years or 41 years to feel like, to have the courage to come out and fix things. Like, if I can't come out and tell the truth and be who I am and fully help somebody out there, if I can help one person not live the way I was living, it was worth it. And it was a combination of things. Everything happened little by little. It was I was home. I sought that therapy. I did a Sober October challenge. That totally changed my relationship with alcohol. It gave me a pause, and that was the first pause I probably had in, I would say, since I was like 16. Going 30 days was the longest, or 31 days since it was October, was the longest time I had ever gone without having at least a couple of drinks here and there. And if we went out to dinner, my wife was driving home. So it made me reevaluate that relationship. I mean, I don't want to be a hypocrite. Listen, we went out to Easter dinner last night, and I had a drink with dinner, but that may have been the first drink I had in 2-3 weeks. And it was one drink, and that was it. And then, you know, if I ever went out to the grill, I used to just grab a beer and go out to the grill. Like, I changed the way I behave.
What was the catalyst for starting Sober October? Did you recognize that problem, or did somebody else suggest it?
Nah, it was like a buddy of mine, and I think 2 buddies and myself did it. And I always like a good challenge. Like, I went vegan for a month on a bet. I just like to see if I always like to see if I could do things. And it was sort of that way. So, you know, the therapy that happened, and then I'll be honest with you, and it's funny because it's a wacky story, but a friend of mine also sent me a link to a podcast that was Jesse Itzler on Joe Rogan. And so Jesse Itzler was talking about reverse engineering time. You know, he's like, I'm approaching 50. The average American will live to be 78. He goes, so I only got 28 years left. Like, I better start moving. And if you shrink that down, he goes, like, he can't just climb Mount Washington. So he goes, there's no 78-year-olds climbing Mount Washington. So if I want to do it, I want to do it now. And he started going about this whole thing about reverse engineering time and how he wanted to spend his time and how it was important that he spent his time. Just to answer your question, through therapy, through that podcast spoke to me, books, self-work, and then running really started coming into play.
And that's where I want to get to is, you know, how the running came in. I will say for everybody listening, if you don't know the name Jesse Itzler, I can't remember if we referenced it on this before. We've had conversations probably kind of off, you know, the record with people, but great dude, friends with Chad Wright, who I know we've talked about, had some really interesting books. But to your point, he's got all kinds of content out there. Just to me, one of the most inspiring people, and I've heard him talk about that time, right? And to break down like, hey, if you've got, let's say you've got 40 years and you see your parents twice a year, then that doesn't mean you have 40 years. You've got 80 interactions with your parents, those kind of things to make you go, man, am I living the life that I really want to live? Mm-hmm. So I think that's fascinating. So first off, thank you for being transparent.
For sure.
And listening to your past, the other podcasts. I think some of the stuff you were just starting to talk about at that point, that was like October of last year. Mm-hmm. And so I know this is a pretty fresh, not the journey itself, but I think some of the things that you're really starting to process. So how did running come into, I guess, to the forefront? And then, man, of course, we're dying to know, how did ultras come into the picture?
Well, yeah, and to the point is, like you said, 4 years ago, you went through a injury, and that was your, I guess, impetus or opportunity to begin to take some serious time to do introspection. And you had done some marathons before, but there's a switch that somewhere along the line, running became very central to you through this process. And I think that's what you're trying to get at here.
Yeah, any of it. I mean, the transformation, but obviously, the way that we came to know you is FMS running.
Right.
Yeah.
And so there was clearly this path that went from the broken human being that you were talking about that was angry and had all these tough relationships to now this very positive guy who has gone out and crushed Yeti. I was looking through some of your results and some of the other things, but I'm super interested in how that came to the forefront and, what role it played.
Yeah. So, when it was a rotator cuff injury. So when I couldn't do anything really, much. So when I would come home from therapy in the early sessions, I mean, I would come home and I'd be white and I was just gassed out. And, I was unpacking some heavy stuff back then. And since I couldn't do anything, I would just start going on walks. And when I walked, I think because I was in a different mindset than I was when I did the marathon, I signed up for marathons and I did them. And I kind of did it for like the love, the accolades, the fact that people would be like, he ran the marathon. Like I didn't do it internally.
I wanted to check the box.
And to check the box, yeah. And you know what? That's something I hung my hat on so I ballooned up to like 195 pounds at one point. But even then I was like, oh, well, I ran New York City. Like no one cares then. You're fat now. Who cares if you ran New York City Marathon 10 years ago? But in my mind, I justified like, oh, I'm still athletic. I'm a marathon runner.
And so for reference though, because 195, what do you weigh in now?
145.
So I want people to know, because 195 can be different for a lot of people.
Yeah, well, I'm short.
I'm 200.
But that's why I want them to know. I mean, you were 50 pounds heavier than you are now. So I think it's
50 pounds heavier. And I'm very short. So I'll be honest about it.
Yeah, I'm 6'5". I'm a giant.
Yeah. There's a picture on Instagram of me at 195 and there's one at 145. So
I saw it, man. It's a big difference.
So you're 5'4"?
Yeah, and I'm not quite 5'4". I'm a little taller than 5'4". I'm about 5'8".
All right, I'll give you that.
5'8" on my tippy toes, maybe 5'7", flat-footed.
Well, he's kind of like your height.
No, but cool. Everything about that old picture with the beard, everything was just a mask to hide it. But to go back to your point, so I used to walk after I got done with it, and I found that when I walked, it brought me clarity. I would go over things that I talked about in therapy. It brought me peace, and I wasn't really feeling anxiety anymore, which was like the greatest feeling ever. It felt like I had been wearing a weighted vest that weighed 1,000 pounds, and someone took it off my chest.
That's incredible.
Mm-hmm. So as I walked, and then slowly but surely I started running when I was feeling better, and it just clicked. It was something that I'm not a particularly religious man. At that point, I was pretty much void of all spirituality. I've come a long way in terms of spirituality. It was through running. I'm still not religious, I'll be perfectly honest. But I believe things happen for a reason, and there is some sense of spirituality within me that I never had before. So, this running kind of just happened organically. It started as, I remember when I first started running again, I couldn't even do 4 miles. And I used to run up this hill and then walk and then run and then walk. And then I just stuck with it. And then I got to 4 miles and it felt good. It felt like an accomplishment.
It was
like it was starting to come back. And then, that 4 miles came in, and, in years past, I had read, obviously like everyone, I read the Dean Karnazes book, and I looked at Western States, even when I was, out of shape, and I'm like, man, that's sick to run that long. So I just happened to see a race that was near my house. It was a 50 miler called Rock the Ridge. And I told my wife, I was like, I'm going to sign up for it. I had no business signing up for it at that point. I was running like 4 or 5 miles at a clip, but I was like, I don't know. This is something that's overcome me. It's bigger than me at this point. I'm finding peace out there. I'm finding happiness. I'm finding contentment with who I am as a human being. So I signed up for that 50-mile race, and man, I was off and running. I'd have to work on Saturday morning. Like I'd have to get there at 9 and I'd be working till midnight, and I would wake up at 4 in the morning and bang out 20 miles before I went there. And I wasn't even tired. I was so in the zone and so focused and so happy with who I was. And, my relationship with my children was improving. My relationship with my wife was improving. Everybody around me, I was just lighter and happier and ready, like almost how I was before. And it was just this weird magical thing that just came over me.
I'm just listening. I think it's an incredible story.
One of the things that really jumped out at me that you said there, and you kind of said it briefly, you said it was different than when I was running marathons. And you said when you just started walking. And I think, we used to run specifically to train. That's what I tell people. Like, I didn't like running until I ran far enough that my mind was wandering because I was running slow enough, because I knew I just would die if I, ran too fast. And it was like a 12 mile, but that was the first time I was like, oh, I'm not running strictly to burn calories. Right. And this is a different experience. So if there's anybody that's plugged in, it's like, man, how are people running this long? Or I hate running, chances are you're not listening to this if you hate running, but but I think that's such an important point, is that you started that process not to say, hey, let me go see how many calories I can knock out, that I can burn. But you recognize that it was essentially a form of meditation, or a way to just kind of internalize. And I found the exact same thing. It just was kind of, by accident. But that's the thing that I love about running now. And I think a lot of people are trying to figure out, how do I make that gap from what I think I hate to what people talk about, where it's, it's enjoyable and it's meditative. And I don't know the best advice besides, hey, don't worry about the calories. Don't worry about the pace. Just kind of, and maybe it starts with walking, if that's where they're at.
I think it is. It echoes kind of a lot of our other guests we've been talking to have echoed the same kind of thing, that physical activity associated as a form of therapy. And I use bunny rabbit ears around therapy. To do physical activity will support any kind of struggles that people are having with addictions or mental struggles and stuff. It supports a release from that. It gives them that escape. And we're hearing it everywhere. And so I would say, if somebody's listening and they're struggling with depression or anxiety or any of those things, and they may not have a great therapist, but they have some feet that maybe they can get on to start trying to walk like you're talking about. I think it supports just living a little bit more productive, more positive, and it kind of releases some of the built up tension that people have.
And what I didn't mean to cut you off. I apologize. What happened with me was I found that the running became more important than, outside of family and everything else, but running became more important. So, when I was running the marathon, I would be out hanging out the night before, and, you slam down beers or whatever it is, and you're out and you get home at 2 in the morning, and then you wake up at 10 and you're like, I'll just go run in there. And you kind of half-ass it. And what was happening here was, I'm not going out because I have to run 20 miles tomorrow. And slowly but surely, the scale started to tip the other way, where I started eliminating everything that would affect my running negatively. And again, it just happened organically. And it was running, it became that important to me and made me feel that good, that it was more important than basically anything. And it still is to this point, that if I don't go running, every couple of days, I'll find if I take 2 or 3 days off, I'll find myself sliding again. And I'll have to go out.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think it shifts your values. And I agree. I don't think because a lot of people say, well, you guys run a lot and obviously you make this more important than everything else you do. And I don't think that's true at all. I think most people that are doing ultras and stuff really do prioritize their families, because we couldn't do the type of training and type of running we do without the support of our families. But it comes to the other areas of our lives outside of that, there's a different priority structure that takes place where we find that we are better versions of ourselves when we are able to do we're able to do things we love. We're able to run and kind of get outside and have that spiritual connection per se with being physically active outdoors. And I think it's not that it's the most important thing in our lives. It is a release from all the negative things that maybe are impacting us. And so I get it a lot, is running more important than your family and everything? And it's like, no, I don't know why you would ever suspect that. It doesn't even come out that way. But.
And I actually heard you say during that another conversation which I thought was really neat, is that you started to recognize that the time away was not a selfish thing because you can be a better version of a father and a better version of a husband. So I would assume that, hearing that, I know that that's how you feel as well. Is that continue to play out in your life now? And you feel like it continues to make you a better, stronger person?
Oh yeah. 100%. It's, I'm not reactionary anymore. I used to be react first and then, say I'm sorry later. I found that a good rule of thumb I've had is if something really, annoys me or something, I'll sit on it for 24 hours. I don't make any big decisions without waiting 24 hours. And part of that 24 hours is going out for a run. And most of the time I'm not even thinking about what I need to think about, but it kind of just creeps up in the back of my mind where I'm like, oh yeah, like that should have worked. And I should go home and do it that way. And I don't have to apologize because I didn't react on it yet. I just, in my mind, I figured it out. So yeah, that continues to be. And listen, I'm sure you guys do the same thing. And going back to the family issue, I make it a point to try and not take away time from my family with the miles. We get up early, we bang out the miles when we can. I work around my kids' schedule. I think I maybe missed one game last year, and that was during delirium. So I make it a point to try and do it. And in fact, the last race I ran was in January. I haven't really run much since then because it was my son's travel soccer season. And I chose to try and hunker down and see as many games as I could. So
I respect that.
I don't think it takes time, and it definitely makes me a better version of everything that I want to be.
So you touched on a couple things, and I want to kind of switch gears or jump back. So you mentioned the 50 miler, and I think that was 2019, May of 2019, if I'm remembering right. So then we jumped to 2020. You had a pretty big, you did first 24-hour event, the delirium, right? And I mean, you had some great runs. I think 102 miles in 24 hours. You ran the Yeti 100, which we both ran in fact, you mentioned the Jesse Kokatek video. If you look right at the beginning, you'll see these ugly mugs right here at the start.
I'll have to look at
it. But I am specifically interested. I don't want to cover the whole race, but you talked about the Yeti 100. I know it was terrible weather because I was following it.
Oh man, it was rough.
But one of the comments that I heard you say, and I'm interested just in the conversation we had about running and some of the healing that comes along with it. You mentioned that you did not want a pacer because you wanted to kind of go through those experiences alone, in your first 100 mile. I'm interested in what you found through that, the lows that you hit, what you kind of learned through that experience. Because like I said, we've been there. So
yeah, I mean, first and foremost, I learned that I'm way more capable of anything that I thought possible I'm going to say this, but it's without anyone's help, which it was all on me, which is not entirely true. My wife came up to crew me, and my mom was there to crew me in terrible weather, like you said. But come the end of the day at, 84 miles in, I had my foot split open. So I taped it. I had like a 6-inch blister next to the split. My feet were just pounded. And, I sat there and I thought about quitting. I was close. I had a long, hard conversation with myself. And I was like, you're not quitting. Like, you will get through this. And it taught me to push through like all the self-doubt I had, all the pain that I've carried. That race was really important to me, and it symbolized almost like my rebirth. Like I went into this race as one person, like, you have to finish this. This is what I had been training for months. I had actually originally trained for GDR in March, and that got canceled because of the pandemic. And this to me, just, I had watched that Yeti video almost every single day. I'm a YouTube geek with running videos, and I watched that Jesse Kokotek video almost every single day, and I was just obsessed with that race. And it just, to me, like, I had to make it through it. And I'll be honest with you, I out there, like, it was rough weather, and it was raining, and there were so many reasons to quit. And I thought about every time I messed up in my life, and all the fuck ups I had, and how bad I screwed things up in my own mind. And then I thought, like, I had come so far to rectify those, that, like, I had made it. I had fixed what I thought was unfixable. So that race to me was, I was doing what I thought was the unthinkable.
So what did you say to yourself in those moments? Was it just keep going, or to me, that's like the magic of.
He connected to his past. He connected to everything he's been going through.
But I mean, so was it just that, like, man, you've gotten this far, like, you can't quit now? Or how did that conversation play out?
Yeah, it was partly that, and it was just like, you can't go back. You can't, like everyone knew I was running it. You can't sit there and be like, oh, well, I tried. Like, I tried. Like, I was moving. I was moving slow, but I was moving. And I just had this thing, like, you owe it to yourself. I owe it to my wife, who stuck with me through this whole journey. I owed it to my kids to show them that they could do this race. Like, there's no way I was coming home not finishing that race, and not, I really wanted sub 24 hard, and I was on a good pace, and I fell apart in the last 16 miles. And I will go back, and I'll run that race again, because I didn't finish the way I wanted to finish. I finished sub 24, but I'm not signed up. No, okay. I did. It was between that and no business. So they were at the same time. So I'm going to do no business 100 this year.
What weekend is that?
October 11th, I think.
The weekend after
10th and 11th.
That's great. Yeah, we've got the Yeti and the Hennepin 100 back to back.
Well, he has it. I'm doing Yeti.
I'm doing one of them.
Yeah, I would say he's booked for both. But.
I'm booked for both, but I'm not doing both. So
yeah, I did hear that you had a family event, right, on one of them?
Yeah, yes. Because I love my family, which is why I can't miss my event with them. For everybody listening.
So yeah, I mean, I will get back there eventually. I just wanted to try some different races, but that conversation was just like there is no option to stop, and I was beat up. The last 16 miles, I was slow coming in. I mean, I'll be honest, it was probably the most pain I've ever been in, and there was something beautiful about it. And I remember walking a little bit, and the guy's like, "Are you all right?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I think so." And I wasn't even on this earth. I don't know where I was. I was in the pain cave, but I was in this something that all I could see was the 2 feet in front of me, with the headlamp, and that's all I needed was just keep going. And I don't remember the conversation exactly, but I just know that I had to get there.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah. And I'm looking forward to that I'll only call it redemption only because I had some of the insight. I know you talked about, envisioning the victorious run across the finish line, and then it turned into,
yes.
The brokenness kind of hobbling across instead. Yeti, this year for me is kind of my redemption, because last time I had a great race, but I went to the hospital afterwards. So I'd like to celebrate without the hospital visit. But man, so you did that in October, and I think, so you were sub 24, like 23 something. Mm-hmm. And then you ran another 100 in January.
Long haul.
And you shaved on a different course, but you shaved over 2 hours, or about 2 hours off, 21 plus something in there. So you've clearly been putting in the work.
Yeah, but I think perspective wise, I think it was over 5 months you did 3 100-mile distances.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I did delirium in November too.
November.
Right.
That's
legit.
That's legit.
That's legit. Most people are still trying to recover from that first one before they branch off and do 2 more within a 5-month span. So that's very impressive.
Yeah, you know, Yeti, it took me a couple of weeks to get over because my feet were so destroyed. And for some reason, delirium, I bounced right back. I felt great after.
Yeah, delirium's down in Charleston, right?
It's in Beaufort.
Beaufort. Okay.
Yeah, so it's like a 1.2 mile loop, I think it is. And it's run by this guy, Tim Waz, who owns Grounded Running, who's been a great friend to me and a mentor down here. So it's a cool race.
So your history at this point is you obviously were a stagehand for the Met, and then you decided that you were going to completely reinvent yourself, just personally, like internally and physically, mentally, spiritually. Everything about you just went through this overhaul of rebuilding from the ground up, like you said. Then you started running these ultras, and you have now moved also into coaching and this new business that you call FMS, which is First Mile Sucks. So tell us a little bit about that and how you came about the name of First Mile Sucks.
Yeah, so first with the name, at the time I was in New Jersey, so those Northeast winters are rough and they're cold. And as I mentioned, I was getting up at like 4 or 5 in the morning. It was dark and there'd be nobody out there. And man, I would just be like, God, this sucks. You know, until you warm up. And I'm like, oh, this First Mile sucks. And then I checked if anyone had trademarked it, and no one had. So that started the idea. I trademarked it, and then I'm like, I'm just going to make an apparel line and test it out and call it First Mile Sucks and see how it goes. So it was just something I had a little bit on the side. And then with the coaching, you know, I got my certification. I just thought that so many times you look at 2 elite runners and you can't identify with them. You're like, my God, this guy is just a machine. I still see, I see the top guys out there running past me. I'm like, this is amazing what these guys are doing. And I thought for me, for my purposes, I could be a relatable figure. Mm-hmm. And, if I was to coach people and I could help them any way I can, I would be like, listen, I don't give them any excuses or any outs because I've been there. I was in the same position you were. I was not this gifted runner from when I was born. So don't tell me that you can't do it, or right. Don't tell me that this doesn't work. It does work. I know I did it on myself. I studied, I have a tendency just to dive head on into things and then, absorb as much as I can. So for that, I thought I had a lot to offer people. I've picked up a lot of knowledge along the way, although I'm not the most scientific guy. I'm enough to get me through, and really just the accountability and the relatability, I think, are my strong suits.
So I do want to talk about your coaching style, but first, man, the First Mile Sucks. Like as soon as we saw it, we're like, it's genius. It's like great. The branding is spot on. And I posted a couple of weeks ago wearing one of your shirts that just says it right on there. And that was the message, is like, it doesn't matter how long you do this. And it got a great response, only because there's so many people that were like, man, I thought it was just me, like, I just thought that I suck at this. And we're like, no, once we realize that, like, it doesn't matter if you've been doing it, if you're new or you've been doing it forever, that first mile will always suck. It's just part of the deal.
And it doesn't matter if you're in New Jersey or not.
Right.
It is hot.
Yeah.
And you got some awesome apparel. We've got some of the shirts and just really dig them. For anybody, like, we're twinsies going on there.
Thank you.
But yeah, man, I think that the branding is spot on. Mm-hmm. And so from a coaching perspective, I really like some of the things you said about relatability. Yeah. Tell us about what do you look for, because some people are really into speed work. Some people are really trained by heart rate. There's all these different kind of styles. And so I'm interested in your style, and what do you look for in a client, so that anybody that's listening that may be interested, kind of what is your ideal or their strengths? I shouldn't say strengths, traits that may make a good fit with you.
Yeah, good match.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, personally, I like them to work as a partnership with me to deal with feedback. So I'm just not dictating things to them that they don't want to do, where it becomes monotonous. I design, the way I work is it goes month by month, and I'll design a 4-week block schedule for them depending on what their goals are and, you know, how far out their races are. And even some people just start from the beginning. So I design that and then I send it to them and I'm like, listen, take a look at this. What do you think? And, you know, I allow them feedback and I tell them that this is going to be a breathing, living, organic thing. We're going to go back and forth and we're going to work on a team with that. I'm big in terms of, I'm big on back-to-back runs. You know, I'm going to refer to longer distances now. I'm big on back-to-back runs. I'm big on running on tired legs. And I'm big on sprints and speed work, tempo runs, that kind of thing. I'm not looking to kill people, but you have to learn to run on tired legs because it's going to become imperative. I also, some people don't do well in terms of breaking things down in terms of mileage. Like if you give them, I'm just going to use round numbers here, a 20-mile run. They're so overcome with 20 miles that they can't even fathom it. So what I do is break it down into time in the beginning. You know, just go at the very beginning, go walk for 2 hours. Mm-hmm. Just get your body used to moving for 2 hours. And then when you're comfortable, implement a little bit of running in there and then build up from that. So those sort of things. I'm big on, listen, you know, if you're going to look to run ultras, you have to put the work in. It has to be, you know, a ton of mileage, but it doesn't have to be mileage to where you're killing yourself. You mentioned long haul before. And I think between November and January when I ran long haul, I was able to take 2 hours off my time. I also had I ran long haul solo. I had no support. My wife couldn't make it down there. And I just set up a tent and did some time there. But in that course, I kind of experimented on myself with a lot of my long, slow runs. What I did was my plan to go into long haul was to run 7 minutes and walk 3 the whole time and save my legs for the end. What I did with Yeti when I went in, I tried running 27 minutes and walking 3 in the beginning and bombing the downhills, which explains, and my legs felt great. I was so paranoid about losing time at the Yeti that it wasn't planned out. But getting back to that, when I did my training, I trained that way. I ran 7 minutes, walked 3, ran 7 minutes, walked 3. You know, I practiced my nutrition. I got everything dialed in pretty good now. Like I know I can only eat certain things. I can only eat crackers, potato chips, watermelon, salami, cheese, bacon, quesadillas, and ramen. That's really all I eat. Wow. And so I kind of got off a little bit there. But in terms of coaching, you know, the biggest thing is that you're going to have to put in the work. I can't do it for you. I can design it for you, but you know, so many times people have come up with excuses as to why they can't run, and you know, they feel a little twinge and they feel this, and I think people just don't want to do it. Where you have to, it's so much more up here than in your legs. You're so much more capable of doing so much more than you think you can. That once you get past that mental barrier, you can. But you know, I try to explain that to them. And more often than not, to simplify it, I give them one day of good speed work, 2 long runs, and you know, and then like a good solid run here. And I check for heart rate, I check for overall feeling, how they're doing, general happiness. If they're not happy with the program, then you know, we have to change things up. I have to keep them happy, have to keep them engaged, and have to let them know that their voice is heard.
I'm interested from the mental, you know, kind of the mental toughness and the people, you know, excuses versus just knowing that they can do more. Have you found that you're able to help kind of people grow in that, or have you found that they're either, you know, the mindset's there or it's not? And have you run into any issues with that where people just wouldn't believe that they could do it?
Yeah, I mean, it takes time. What I do is I try to give, if it's somebody just starting out, I try to make it runs and build them up incrementally where it's small goals. So they take them one step at a time. And I you know, it's like a reward system. If they can get over that initial hump and they have some, you know, levels of happiness and achievement, then it keeps them coming back for more. And on the other side, I've had other people that you just couldn't help either. I've had, you know, I offer coaching services to anyone that has any type of mental health issues. If they come to me and they say they want to go that route, I'll do it for free. for as long as they want. But I've actually found that that has not been as successful as I hoped. I don't know if it's people weren't ready for it, or if it's it's almost like poker. You're not really playing poker until you lose money.
Right.
So I don't know if it's a monetary issue because they're not paying for it. The commitment's not there. But I had hoped to do better with that. And just in the spirit of transparency, it hasn't been as successful as I hoped. Which I guess in the end is almost like any rehab program where if you can get 50%. It's a good thing. But yeah, the biggest thing is that, and there's been a ton of people that are just still floating. It's hard to, if someone had talked to me before I was ready to make the change, I would have fought back too. It's hard to convince somebody that they can do something that they believe they can't. They have to, I can give them the tools, but they have to get there by themselves.
Yeah, just on a side note about what you're doing and how you're offering free coaching and stuff for those with mental struggles and stuff. I agree. I think that's a great pursuit. I do think there's a lot of challenges inherent in that, just because I tend to look at things from the perspective that to gain commitment, that there has to be a personal investment. So if I want to be committed in something, I have to invest personally somehow into something in order to be committed to that activity or whatever it is. We were talking a little bit earlier about races and signing up for the next race and which race is on your calendar. And I know that's something that you're also a huge proponent of as well. And I find that if I'm personally invested monetarily or committed mentally to, invested mentally into that, then I tend to be committed in training, more disciplined to it. But if it's like, I think I may do this race, it's in April or May and stuff, but I haven't signed up for it, or I'm not sure, then my training may be a lot more lax or less disciplined. And so I think, commitment comes often with a personal investment. It can be monetary or some other mental commitment or investment rather to get that commitment. So I think that may be part of what you're seeing there.
Yeah, definitely. It's I think you always fall into a trap of wanting people to think like you do and hope they're ready for the change. But if they're not, they're not. There's nothing you can do. Right.
It takes time, like it took you as well to kind of get to that point that it was time to make a change or time to commit yourself to something as well. So I think it's great the pursuit, at least to make that available for those and at least offer it to them.
So just because I'm curious, a couple of things, because I like some of the data stuff. So you mentioned heart rate. I've also heard you mention cadence. Anything specific that you're looking for in those things? Only because I know both of them are kind of buzzwords, right? And running in ultras now.
Yeah, for cadence, I look for a high, like a shorter. I find that if on myself and with other athletes I've worked with, the shorter steps end up being better. So like cadence somewhere in the neighborhood of like 164 to 170, maybe 175 if you're really moving. That fast turnover rate, I find most of the time that your legs land under your base. So if you're extending so long that your stride so long, it torques the knee, torques the ankle. It's how you end up with injuries. It's more, in my personal experience, it's more wear and tear on the joints, that sort of thing. Heart rate, I just look for some consistency. So if it's not, if it's 180, 160, 180, 150, you're all over the place. I look for like a nice 149, 150 over the course of a long run that you can kind of dial in and stay consistent with it.
Yeah, man. And I'm a big proponent of cadence and written some blogs and stuff on it. I personally, like you said, I think everybody's, different people have different opinions, but I think it's one of the best things in terms of managing form. And for exactly the reason that you just said, if you can keep those quick footfalls, it prevents overstriding. It's really hard to run bent over with fast feet, So that's one of the few things that I tend to not try to give too much advice, but that's one of the things when people say, hey, what would you recommend? I'm like, start by looking at your cadence. And if it's really low, if it's lower than like probably where you're saying 170, then you may need to start looking at potentially making adjustments. So I just thought I'd chime in. I like that a lot.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I can only go from my own experiences and other data I've read. And there's definitely people with way more experience than me, but these are the things that have worked for me. They've been successful. They've worked with other people I've been working with. So, I have to believe in them.
For sure.
Yeah, you mentioned a second ago that you're also certified as a certified coach. What kind of certification do you have?
USCA.
USCA. Is there?
Yeah.
I know that's the training academy. Is there a specific certification within there that you have?
Yeah, so there's, run coach certification in there. The reason I like that one is that you have to write a scientific paper every 2 years on some type of study within the concept of running that you have to submit to them to keep your license active. So I like that aspect of it, that it forces you to constantly stay on top of things and learn new things and write some material.
So I'm curious now, what was your paper on?
So you don't have to do it initially. So I just passed the test, so I'm still coming. So it's coming in, but I could guarantee it'll have something to do with probably with mental health. I've really made that to my my main goal to help spread, the word about running, I guess would be the right way to describe it. But it'll definitely be along those lines.
Very cool.
That's awesome. I had something right at the top of my head too.
I'm glad I wrote that for you.
Oh no, I know what it was. And I don't know how much of your client base, are doing the longer distances, the ultra runners, but have you looked at the USCA ultra running coaching certification? Are you familiar with it?
Yeah, it's new. Yeah, it just came out a couple of weeks ago. So
it's
on my radar.
Jason Koop, who is involved with that, and I'm sure you know the name, in terms of what you're talking about, kind of the scientific data, he's been kind of the leader in terms of, putting that data together and really coming up with some strategies around it. So I thought it was really cool that he's involved in that. So I'll be interested if you end up stepping through that, kind of what your thoughts are on the program.
Yeah, I definitely will. And he's amazing. He does some incredible stuff.
Yeah.
So like you said, once he's involved with anything, you know it's legit.
So on the same topic of coaching, though, what is one of your favorite things about coaching?
It's going to sound cheesy, but it's helping people to realize their goals and their happiness and to see, the happiness at the end of the race. And this is a little bit of a personal, but even my wife, who never ran before, just finished her first half marathon. And I ran it with her, and it's a little tough coaching your wife. It's dicey sometimes at dinner, but to see her face and to see like that sense of accomplishment, and she's one of the people who never thought she could do it, and to see how happy she was at the finish line, that just makes it all worthwhile for me. It goes the same way to anybody I'm working with, to see them accomplish what they want to accomplish, and knowing I played a small little part in it. It was just, it just brings me joy, and there's nothing better than that.
So curiosity, when you were coaching your wife, did you challenge her mental toughness at all?
I did.
I'll say you're still alive, but you must have some tact, or she's got some patience.
She's a saint. She has patience, but yeah, a couple of times she was waning, and I'm like, you have to do this. You got it. I would just torture her till she went out. If she was having like an off day, I think she would just go out to shut me up.
Yeah, but she was grateful in the end.
Yeah, she was grateful, and it was a cool experience to get to run it, and it was so important for me because the first half she had gotten canceled that she was supposed to run. So then she's like, let's just run 13.1 miles by ourselves, and we could do it. But I didn't think that was good enough. It was so important to me because there were so many days that she sat there like a Yeti or Delirium, wherever it was, just sat there in a field in pouring rain, like waiting for me. And at the end, I got all the glory. I got all the congratulations. I got, it was my day. And it was so important to me that she has that same experience at the finish line, that she should have her day, that she should get, she earned that. And we ran the race together, and I stopped maybe like 500 yards before the finish and let her finish first, just to make sure that, it wasn't two of us that finished. And she deserved that moment because I wanted her to experience the happiness that I've experienced at finish lines. And so many times she's been in the background that no one gave her enough credit for it, that I'm glad that she got to have that moment.
Yeah, I think it's amazing. And for everybody listening, it says a lot about you, because we had sent you an email and asked some things ahead of time. Hey, and one of the questions was, what is your most memorable running experience? And you've had some big ones personally, but it was your wife finishing the half marathon, you know. But even the way you talk about First Mile Sucks running, kind of, you know, the apparel piece to me sounds like the business venture. You know, obviously there's joy that comes from it, but you talk about the coaching from a fulfillment standpoint. And so that comment about, I mean, obviously she's your wife, but it's built into you to enjoy seeing the success in people and having a hand in that. It makes me a fan in terms of what you're doing with, you know, First Mile Sucks. And I think that's really cool, man. And honestly ties a lot into why we do a podcast, you know, because for us, it's any way we can enable people to take that next step, kind of the things you're talking about. So I really relate to what you're saying.
Thank you. I think that's one of the reasons too, like trail running really appeals to me so much. And you hear it so often, is that when you go out there, I mean, the conversations that you share with people that you hardly know, and the encouragement that you get from people and the other runners, it's just unlike anything else. You know, everybody's out there competing against themselves. You know, obviously if you're at the top of the sport, it's a whole different level, but even people at the top of the sport, if you've ever had the opportunity to speak to them, they're just genuinely good, down to earth people. And to have that experience of encouragement and it's hard not to love trail running. You show up 10 minutes before a race, a guy says, let's go. And you go out there and it's, you know, that 150 people out there against the world. And it's an experience that's unlike any other.
I 100% agree.
Agreed. Very cool.
So what I want to kind of do a summary, because there are some holes in the story and we probably don't have the time to kind of go into it, but dude, you started at the opera, stressed out of your mind, essentially, right? Dealing with anxiety and different things, got to a point where you made this massive change, and not only got yourself healthy or working down that road, but the part we skipped, right, was to completely make the move from New Jersey to Hilton Head, which is a fascinating story in its own. Like I said, one of our favorite places. So I plan to come run with you at some point. But I think it's just so inspiring to know that, because there's a lot of people that feel stuck. The only anxiety that I've ever dealt with in my life was, and it wasn't near to that extent, but it was when I felt a misalignment with what I felt like I was made for, to the things that I was doing every day. And so I'm just interested, now that you're sitting on the other side of it, what words do you have, or is there any bit of advice or something, just if somebody may be thinking, man, he did it, but I don't know that I could do it. You know, what would you say to that person?
I mean, obviously you say you can do it. I go back to talking about the time that we talked about before, the reverse engineering of time. A big factor for me was I would have had about 20 years left at the Met before I could have retired. So I thought, did the thought of spending 20 more years there, was that scarier to me than the thought of taking a chance and failing? And the thought of spending 20 more years there was scarier to me. I'll also tell this to anybody that's out there, is that I never want to sit on my deathbed, hopefully when I'm old, and be like, what if I could have done this? What if I had just taken those chances? What if I had, done X, Y, Z? Like, you know what? I could always get another job. I can always figure something out. You know, if you're miserable, it's not worth it. There's a way to figure it out. There's a quick little story. I'm sorry. I'm going to butcher a little bit, but there was a story. It was a book, I believe, written by an ICU nurse, and she was in a hospital in New York. I think I'm correct with this. And there was an actor who was famous when he was a child, and then he was suffering from cancer at the end, and he was just bitter and angry. And she's like, "What's the matter?" And he's like, well, "What if I had been a bigger star? What if I had been, what if I had been this?" And he was just filled with anger. And the same nurse was there when Lou Reed from the Velvet Underground was towards his last days, and he just had this big smile on his face. And she was like, "Are you all right?" And he's like, "Man," he's like, "what a fucking ride." And that's the way I want to go at the end. Like, I don't want to have any regrets. It'll be too late then. I needed this going back to like just the spirituality, I needed to scratch this itch. I needed to know if I could do this. Like I never wanted to know what if. This was just something that I had to know. I would rather die as a failure than not knowing if I was a failure or not. And I encourage everyone out there to if you have something that's you have an itch that you have to scratch, do not leave a what if at the end of the road, because life is too short. I don't want my last thought to ever be what if. And, another thing was, I wanted to show my kids that it's never too late. I can't talk about reinventing myself and preaching to them to go do something that makes you happy if I'm not doing it. So, that's the big thing I'll say to somebody. Don't leave a what if on the table. You only have one ride. Don't leave a what if there. It's like folding pocket aces.
That's cool. Yeah, I just recently read a book that was talking about the same idea, and it said you got to be comfortable taking the risk to look stupid.
Yeah, and that was a big thing for me too in terms of overcoming anxiety and depression. I was always worried about what people thought, that people would be like, this guy's nuts. What is he doing? Like, this guy gave up a big career in New York, and what is he, insane? And what's that? And I got to the point I didn't care. I was just, this is who I am, and the guys that are friends with me are still friends, and the people that aren't, they aren't. But there's not many of them. No one's been unsupportive, at least to my face.
I think it's great, man. And I know that you plug into what we're doing. And so, our message really is to just show up, that just kind of do what you can. And so you have been an example, not only from a running standpoint, because clearly you're putting in the miles and you're doing the training and, the results are showing. But just to go to a place where you felt helpless and dealt with the anxiety and were working insane hours and probably had every excuse that somebody may come up with to not make the change, and to just over time systematically come to where you are now, I just think, like I said, is inspiring, and it's clearly the example of what we talk about. So thank you for doing that. I want people, so if you're listening, go check out on social media, it's FMS Running. Tell me the website.
FMSrunning.com.
Okay. FMSrunning.com. Check out the shirts. Like I said, branding is freaking genius. If you're looking for a coach, look them up. And if you're not looking for either and you happen to be in Hilton Head, check out Ron. You're doing a lot of great things. You do like a Monday coaching tips. You're all over social media. So you add a lot of value. Make sure you check him out. And Ron, man, it's been such a pleasure talking with you tonight. We really appreciate you being here.
No, thank you. I appreciate it. And I'm sorry if I go, as I said to you, I can go on and on and on. And I have a tendency to babble a lot. So I apologize if I went on some rambles out there, but it kind of just free flowed right off the brain. And thank you guys for having me. It was great. And I love the show that you guys are doing. And I think you're really onto something. And thank you for having me. I'm humbled to be here.
Oh, we really appreciate it. Sorry, go ahead.
No,
I was just saying, yeah, we really appreciate it. And we like the babbling because I babble too. And so we just appreciate you taking the time and spending the evening with us.
There's a lot of value added though. I think a lot of people are really going to connect to your story.
For sure.
So, well, cool, man. We will talk soon, and cut. I know, but now we're buds, dude. Whether you like it or not.
Oh my God, I'm sorry. I'm blanked out today.
What's up, man?
Oh. Hey, what's up, guys?
Oh, look, matching. Twinsies.
I can change it if you want.
It's mind-boggling, let's be honest. When we first started, we're like, if we have one person interested in what we have to say other than our wives, then it's a good day.
Yeah.
Jeff's like, all right, let's start the podcast.
I'm good.
Yeah, I'm sorry, man.
No, I'm just thinking that y'all are going to give me a headache because I've got to be out of here at 10.
Okay, I'm sorry, man. I told you I could I'm coming in. I was nervous. I'm coming in. You guys have had some good shows. I'm coming in after some heavy hitters.
I'm kidding. It's 8:15. If it goes to 10, I'm killing you both. I'll just get up and leave.
I did know. So you guys, I'll try to be good. You edit out cursing, right? Yeah, I won't go full Goggins. I promise. But,
like what would you do when Goggins says he wants to be on our show?
We'll just have to put the little E. I can put explicit.
Okay.
So
we'll put an E. Thanks, man.
We'll take the compliment.
We'll always take compliments.
We got some NCAA basketball to watch too.
That's why I said I gotta go, right? But I didn't want to be the rude one and say I like basketball, but I'm like overrunning.